Welcome to Curly Convos. I'm your host, Curly Sid, a 23-year-old Gen Z activist on a mission to spark change. As a nonprofit leader, union member, and advocate for racial and reproductive justice, I'm here to dig into the issues that matter most. This podcast goes beyond the headlines and surface level conversations. We're here to ask big questions, challenge assumptions, and dig into the issues that truly matter. Each episode is a chance to think deeply, connect ideas, and see the world through a fresh lens. Join Curly Convos every other Friday for bold takes, fresh perspectives, and unfiltered discussions that push boundaries and inspire action. Have you ever felt guilty for taking a break, like the world might fall apart if you stopped for just one moment? That's not an accident. That's the system working exactly as it was designed. But here's the truth. Choosing to care for yourself and love yourself isn't selfish. It's revolutionary. In this episode, we are breaking down how self-love is one of the most radical things you can do. Rest, resist, repeat. Self-love is radical AF. This podcast episode is brought to you by my last therapy appointment. I want to start by defining some terms. So, first, self-care, which is deliberate actions and practices aimed at nurturing one's mental, emotional, and physical health. It's about finding things that genuinely fulfill you and sustain you, like setting healthy boundaries, engaging in activities that promote personal growth, and ensuring adequate rest. The goal of self-care is to prevent burnout. The next term I want to just quickly identify is self-love. When I talk about self-love, I'm talking about being rooted in self-awareness. Self-love is recognizing and accepting your intrinsic worth, including your strengths and imperfections. It's about prioritizing your well-being and acknowledging your feelings and forgiving yourself for past mistakes. I know. And the last term I just want to identify is burnout, which is a state of chronic physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion, usually caused by prolonged stress. The World Health Organization defines burnout as having three primary components, being exhaustion, cynicism, and reduced effectiveness. Self-care and self-love aren't just buzzwords, they are powerful ways to push back against a world that demands we constantly sacrifice and ignore our own needs. When we prioritize rest and self-worth, we take control of our lives and we send a message. We are more than what we produce. I just want to take a quick moment to acknowledge that everything I'm sharing today is something that I'm currently working on and struggle with. I'm in therapy and I really do struggle with a lot of these concepts every single day, especially when it comes to setting boundaries and, making space for myself and taking care of myself. It's not easy, and I know that many of you may not feel ready or like you're not there yet. It's a process, and trust me, you are not alone. With the headlines, every single day and all of the fucked up stuff that we see rolling out like every single hour, it is so easy to feel defeated. Sophia and I were recently messaging about how overwhelming it is just to try and fact check everything and stay on top of the news, how exhausting it is to stay informed without it feeling like it's crushing you, like you're drowning. It's so depressing, it's so overwhelming, and it's exactly what every historian, activist, climate scientist, and leftist has been screaming for years. But it took people having to see a Nazi salute to think, oh shit, maybe they were right. Like, yeah, maybe the leftists that you've been calling liberals and writing off every single holiday were just trying to warn you. Maybe we had a point. It's exhausting, it's so frustrating, and it's really difficult not to be angry and sad about everything that's happening. And I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy, but that's just the reality. And I can absolutely accept the outcomes of the election, but I will not accept the racism, the injustice, the harm that is coming with the new administration and living in this plutocratic capitalist hellscape. We have to take care of ourselves because if we don't, we can't keep doing the work that we are all here to do. We can't keep fighting for justice and change, for what's right. And I'm not great at this either. I'm not great at delegating. I'm not great at self care. I'm not great at having hobbies. But I'm still figuring it out. I'm working on it and I struggle with it, but little bits of progress is better than no progress. We have to find ways to take breaks and to show up for ourselves first. And only then can we keep showing up. And this episode is really a reminder to myself, to my friends, to my family, to my community, to you. And that's why I'm making it. Self care has been used as a tool for resistance, especially within marginalized communities, for decades. In the 1970s, Black feminists like Audre Lorde highlighted the importance of self care as a means of self preservation in a society that actively marginalized her. And in her famous essay, The Uses of Anger, she talks about how self care is vital for survival when oppressed. And one of the quotes being, caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Audre Lorde. The Black Panther Party was another group that really understood the connection between self care and revolutionary politics. They ran free breakfast programs, healthcare clinics, community self defense programs, and they really cared for the health and well being of their communities. And this is a fantastic example of community care being intertwined with political action or mutual aid, if you will. In the 1960s and 70s, feminists really emphasized self love and self care as an act of resistance against societal expectations that confined women to roles of servitude. Women established self help groups and health clinics. The Boston Women's Health Collective book, Our Bodies, Ourselves, became a groundbreaking resource empowering women to understand their bodies and make informed health decisions. The Combahee River Collective of 1974 brought attention to the experiences of Black women, emphasizing how race, gender, and class oppression really intersected. Their work is widely regarded as a foundation for intersectional feminism. But why does it feel like there's so many barriers to self-care? Well, capitalism has hijacked self-care, really turning it into a consumer product. Companies have turned self care into a multi billion-dollar industry, selling everything from luxury face masks to wellness retreats. This commodification of self care often overlooks mental health or emotional aspects. Self-care now is marketed as something you buy rather than something that you practice. The wellness trends in the past decade have really led to a disconnect between what real self-care looks like and what we're told it should look like through ads and influencers. For so many people, self-care feels so unattainable because they lack the time, the money, or the resources. Systems like capitalism, patriarchy, and racism create and maintain barriers to self-love and self-care, especially for marginalized groups. When a woman prioritizes her own needs, like taking a solo trip, running errands without the kids, or simply resting, it's often labeled as selfish. Society really pressures women, especially mothers, to constantly give to others, making self-care feel almost selfish. Women in leadership roles are often faced with superwoman syndrome, where they feel pressured to excel at everything and really neglect their own care. The strong Black woman trope perpetuates the idea that Black women must endure hardship without complaint, often leading to neglect of their own mental and physical health. By embracing self-care, women and feminine presenting people have really challenged the cultural narrative that says they must do it all. But it's not only women, of course. Our current culture places value on being consistently busy, productive, and always on. The hustle culture really encourages people to work multiple jobs, skip vacations, and push through exhaustion for the sake of success. The alt-right pipeline, you know me, I'm gonna talk about the alt-right pipeline, really glorifies this hustle culture by tying financial successes to personal worth and promoting the idea that hard work alone defines masculinity and dominance.
Ignore and outperform them. While you're over there watching me and talking about me, I'm working hard. You keep gossiping and I'll keep working. You keep talking smack and I'll keep working. And when you finally look around at where you are and where I'm at, you will lose and I will win.
This narrative reinforces the survival of the fittest mindset, where those who can't keep up are really blamed for their own struggles. Men's issues. It's a gateway to radicalization, and it really offers purpose through toxic productivity and scapegoating marginalized communities. Burnout isn't just about working too hard, it's about being trapped in systems that prioritize profit over people. Healthcare workers, teachers, retail employees often experience burnout because these roles are undervalued and underpaid. Yet they are essential for society's functioning. Unions were created to combat these systematic inequalities and give workers collective power to demand better conditions like weekends, fair pay, reasonable hours, and safe working conditions. Strikes like the Pullman strike of 1894 or the United Auto Workers sit-down strike of 1936 show how collective action has historically improved conditions for workers. The decline of unions in the United States has significant implication for worker exploitation and burnout. In 1983, 20.1% of American workers were union members, and by 2023, this figure had dropped to 10%. Recent labor movements really highlight the ongoing struggles that workers face. Amazon delivery drivers and Starbucks baristas have, initiated strikes. They are demanding recognition and fair contracts. And we can't forget about California's incarcerated firefighters. Despite their critical role in combating wildfires, they receive minimal compensation, often as low as $5 per hour, and really lack essential labor protections. And I can't say all of this without saying the political climate also plays a crucial role in shaping labor rights. The Trump administration plans on and will enact policies that will undermine workers' protections and unions. Donald Trump is a scab. But besides that, he outlined in his Project 2025 plan, they want to erase employer retaliation against union organizers. They want to allow employers to create sham company unions, and they want to ban public service unions. These initiatives are a part of a concerted effort to weaken labor unions and reduce worker protections. Ultimately, they want to pay us less, they want us to do more for less. They don't want you to spend time with your family. They just want you to make money for them. The decline in union membership and the erosion of labor rights have been linked to rising levels of worker burnout and exploitation. Without strong unions, workers have fewer avenues to advocate for fair labor practices. It's imperative that we stay vigilant and continue pushing back against policies that prioritize profit over people. We must ensure that labor rights are protected and strengthened, because burnout is a tool of control. Keeping people exhausted and overwhelmed prevents them from questioning or resisting systematic injustice. If you're an activist who doesn't take time for self-care, we can burn out very quickly, and that limits our ability to sustain long-term change. But that's, the advocate's dilemma, right? Self-care and guilt. Activists, or those who work in advocacy like myself, often feel like every moment spent on self-care is a moment that we could be working on fighting for change. This internal conflict really creates a cycle of burnout. I experience this a lot. This is the main topic in therapy, is how do I not feel guilty for resting, especially last year when I was working at my one nonprofit job and running, the local nonprofit, also working and trying to pass Amendment 79 here in Colorado, as well as my coworkers and I forming a union and fighting ordinances within my local city that were trying to ban abortion. I fought people like literally actually like Jonathan Mitchell and Mark Lee Dixon twice now. My community has. In the election, it was incredibly overstimulating. I was on autopilot the entire year, and then you factor in things like my significant other and my home and cleaning. It feels so overwhelming, and it's so hard to delegate. Also, as an activist, we find it's hard to get people involved, get people connected. We are constantly trying to engage volunteers and mentor other activists. And how do you balance all of that? In early 2021, for example, I had quit activism. I had been attacked. I was 18 years old. I was living with my family and I was putting them in jeopardy. In their eyes, I was putting them in harm's way. And they told me like, you're creating an unsafe environment for us. I need you to choose. I need you to stop this or move out. And that's a whole different trauma, incredible story, my beginnings of activism. I don't know how much of this story I'm going to leave in. But I'd stopped because I didn't have the means to move out and I didn't want to at that point. So I stopped being an activist for about a year and a half and I felt worthless. I felt so incredibly depressed and like any of the work that I did outside of that really didn't matter. I'd really found my personal passion in advocacy. I found community and within advocacy. So leaving and doing nothing was really difficult. And when I got back into advocacy, when we heard leaks of the Dobbs decision that they were going to overturn Roe versus Wade, I was terrified, but that had been what I'd been waiting for. And at this point, I was moved out. I wasn't putting people in harm's way and I could really be free to pursue my own personal passion. With that said, because I had felt like I wasn't doing anything for about a year and a half, I really started to overcompensate. And that's where I ended up joining and doing so many things like last year. But it was very overwhelming. It was very stressful, and I realized I would come home at the end of the day at 9 p.m. I would get off of all of my meetings and I would think like I haven't accomplished anything. And that's literally crazy. Like that is the farthest from the truth, but it's so easy to get caught up in hustle culture or to be caught up in the headlines and to be so high anxiety, always running at 110% like I do, going to bed at 3 a.m., waking up at 8 a.m., and in between all of that time figuring out how you can make more of an impact. Like it has such a huge mental effect. I can't stress enough how important it is, not only for myself, but for everyone else in my community to prioritize our own well being. So many of my mentors, of my older mentors, have approached me and been like, oh, well, people like us who do this work get sick and are usually hospitalized after big elections like this. Or they themselves are very chronically ill because we pour more into the community than we do ourselves. And I think with the new administration, the reason I wanted to create this podcast, the reason this is my number one topic in therapy, is because it just is going to get worse. And if we don't start creating a norm of self-care, none of us will be able to fight all of the horrible things that are coming every single day, every hour of the day. I'll leave you with that. Enough of my personal experiences. Equating self-care with selfishness is an unsustainable mindset. Why do we feel like the work that we're doing is never enough? And how can we shift that mindset? I live with this tension every day as someone who really cares deeply about the work that I do. I really struggle with the guilt of stepping back to take care of myself. But I've been coming to realize that if I don't rest, I'm not showing up as my best self for the people that I'm really trying to help. And that's the hardest but most necessary lesson of self care. It's not selfish, it's essential. For the master's tool will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us temporarily to beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. Audre Lorde. Please remember, this is a practice. I'm still navigating it, and even though I've learned some, I still find myself struggling. We're all on this journey together, and it's okay to not have it all figured out. We're constantly told that self care is about individual activities, and while these can be enjoyable, like shopping or doing a face mask, they don't necessarily offer true nourishment. Reclaiming your time means asking yourself what really nourishes me. And this is also something that's really difficult to find out if you've been disconnected from yourself for a long time. It's really hard to know, like, what do I enjoy? But hey, it's worth finding out. Community care versus individual wellness is also something I've really been exploring. Real community care is about mutual aid. Look at mutual aid networks where people can come together and take care of one another without expecting anything in return. What is a mutual aid network? Well, it's people banding together to support each other in times of crises, whether that's helping a neighbor with groceries or organizing a food drive. And I also highly recommend looking for care circles, which are groups of people supporting one another through mental health struggles, childcare, or just sharing resources. Wellness isn't just about taking time for yourself, it's about creating systems of support that make the concept of well being accessible to everybody. We must start thinking about self care in a way that's not just marketed to you, but in ways that genuinely make you feel whole, free, and at ease. What nourishes you? Is it time with your loved ones? Is it a few quiet moments of reflection? Is it being creative? It's really important to ask yourself what makes you feel genuinely fulfilled and what pressures are guiding your idea of wellness. And we have to start questioning societal norms. Does the wellness industry sell you an image of health and happiness that doesn't align with your own needs? How can you let go of societal pressures to be well in the way that's been commodified and instead embrace self-love on your own terms? Sometimes it feels impossible to take the time you need when the world around you demands so much. I really do get it. This is something I'm actively working on, and I'm here to remind you that it's okay to take it one step at a time. This one's a hard one, but one of the most radical acts of self-care is setting boundaries. It's a direct way of rejecting expectations and demands placed on us by these oppressive systems that really thrive off of us being exhausted and overworked. So say no when you need to, not out of selfishness, but out of self respect. Don't answer emails after work hours, and maybe take some time away from social media when it feels draining. At the end of the day, self care and self love should look different for each person because each person has unique needs. I really encourage you to throw out the societal script that self care is about facials or massages and really explore what it means for you. What is self love to you? My union organizer always tells me to go take a walk. I stress her out, I know. I appreciate all of her work. Always tells me to go take a walk. And, my therapist always tells me to go do something that you love. Find what you love to do. or perhaps say no to extra commitments. It's so hard to do, I know. Self care really isn't a one time thing, it's ongoing, and you have to periodically check in with yourself. How am I doing? What do I need right now? I really want us to pause, reflect, and make a plan that prioritizes you. Because when you take care of yourself, you're better equipped to take care of your community, your work, and everything that really matters to you. I'll work on this too, but we have to be kind to ourselves. And before I leave you, I really want you to think about something. What are ways to recognize burnout before it becomes debilitating? Thank you for joining Curly Convos. I'm your host, Curly Sid, and I will see you in a few weeks. Bye.